Welcome to our fun little study group for PP 5361 Theory and Management of Public Service Organizations. These are the readings from the required text, the diversity bonus, how great teams pay off in the knowledge economy, Chapter 4.
So glad to be here.
Grab a coffee, pull up a chair, and let's get into it.
And we should say this is a big one today. We're tackling Chapter 4, which is titled Identity Diversity.
Yeah, this is really the chapter where things get real. I feel like we've been talking a lot in our previous sessions about cognitive diversity, how people think differently.
Right, which is a pretty comfortable topic.
It is. It's safe. Everyone loves the idea of diverse thinking. But this chapter, it forces us to look at the thing everyone actually thinks of when they hear the word diversity.
The elephant in the room.
Exactly. We're talking race, gender, age, physical abilities, all the stuff that's, on your driver's license.
And the core tension, really the central struggle that this whole chapter wrestles with, is that distinction between identity diversity, which is who people are fundamentally, and cognitive diversity.
Which is how they think.
Yeah.
The mental models, the heuristics, all the knowledge they carry around.
Precisely. And the big question, which is sort of the mission for our deep dive today, is trying to figure out if there's a real bridge between those two things.
Right. Does having a diverse identity actually, lead to those cognitive bonuses that everyone's chasing?
Yeah.
Or are we all just assuming it does?
Is it a causal link or is it just a correlation? It's such a critical distinction.
It really is.
Because, logically, you could argue there's a very bright line between who you are and how you think.
Of course. I can be from a certain demographic and have a completely different political view or a different way of solving problems than my neighbor who looks just like me.
Exactly. But empirically, and this is the point the author, Scott Page, really hammers home, that line gets very, very blurry in the real world. Our identities genuinely influence what we know, how we perceive events, and, ultimately how we process information.
Before we get into the heavy frameworks, and there are 3 really good ones in this chapter, I wanted to start with that quote the author uses right at the top.
Ah, the Emerson quote.
The Ralph Waldo Emerson one.
Yeah.
About the Labrador spar. I love that one.
It's such a weird, specific image, but it really stuck with me. Emerson writes that a man is like a bit of Labrador spar, which has, and I'm quoting here, no luster as you turn it in your hand until you come to a particular angle. Then it shows deep and beautiful colors.
It's a very poetic way to set the stage, isn't it? He's basically saying that there's no sort of universal applicability in people. We can seem dull.
Yeah, unremarkable.
Unremarkable until we're turned to that one specific angle where our unique talent or our perspective just shines.
And that's the whole point for this chapter. We're looking for those specific angles where identity diversity creates that luster, that bonus for a team, for an organization.
I think that's a beautiful way to frame it because it shifts the conversation away from, just checking boxes.
Yes, and moves it toward finding the angle, finding where that value really lies.
So let's unpack how we even begin to look at identity. The text gives us 3 specific mental models frameworks, really, to stop us from thinking about diversity in lazy ways.
The first one is probably the most familiar, the iceberg.
Right. 2 icebergs, actually, which was a surprise. But let's start with the classic one, the physical iceberg.
Okay, so the concept here is pretty intuitive, right? Everyone's seen the picture. An iceberg is split by the waterline.
Above the water, you have the stuff you can see immediately. Skin color, gender, your proximate age, physical qualities like height, things like that.
And then below the water, that's where all the invisible attributes are hiding.
Your values, your religion, your personal history, ancestry, education, social, class.
The list goes on. And the problem, according to text, is that we humans have an inherent selection bias for what's above the waterline. It's what we see first.
So we make judgments and we categorize people based on just that little tip of the iceberg.
We see the tip and we fool ourselves into thinking we know the shape of the massive block of ice hidden beneath the water.
The book had a really specific example of this that I thought was super helpful. It talked about selecting a panel of, quote, Asian Americans for a discussion.
Right. And if you're just looking above the waterline, just at the visible part, you might pick 2 people who look like they fit that category. You'd pat yourself on the back and think, great, I've got representation.
Check the box.
Check the box. But below the waterline, I mean, one of those people might be a first-generation Chinese-American Buddhist whose family arrived recently, and the other could be a third-generation Korean-American Christian whose family has been in the South for 80 years.
Which is a massive, massive difference.
It's enormous. Their experiences, their values, their worldviews, what the author calls their cognitive repertoires, they might be completely different. Polar opposites, even.
One person's worldview could be shaped by, I don't know, collectivism and Buddhist philosophy, while the other's is deeply influenced by the Protestant work ethic and Southern American culture.
But if we only focus on that visible tip, we just lump them together. We completely miss the nuance. We miss the actual diversity we claim to be looking for.
And then, just when you think you've got it, the author throws a curveball and introduces the virtual iceberg.
This is the modern twist. And it's so relevant.
So what's the idea here?
Well, in the physical world, when we meet face to face, I see your face, I can guess your age, I don't see your criminal record, or your political donations, or your credit score.
Okay, that's all below the waterline.
Exactly. But in the virtual world online, that iceberg basically flips upside down. All that data mining reveals the stuff that used to be hidden.
It's like online, your credit score, your property ownership, your voting record, that's the stuff that's most visible to the algorithms.
That's right. The algorithm doesn't care about your face, it cares about your behavior, your data trail.
So the big takeaway from the two icebergs is that the attributes that actually drive our behavior, things like our income, our mental health, our class, our upbringing, are usually below the physical waterline.
But we, as humans, keep making judgments based on what's above it. We see race and we assume behavior when the real driver is often something invisible like neighborhood or social class.
The virtual iceberg just shows us how much crucial data we're missing when we only look each other face to face.
It's a huge blind spot. And that leads perfectly into the second framework, which I have to say I think is the most useful tool in this entire chapter.
The timber-framed house.
Yes. This is the analogy for intersectionality.
The idea here, as I understood it, is that a person isn't just a pile of bricks. You can't just take a brick-labeled woman and a brick-labeled African-American and stack them up and say, there, that's it.
No, a person is a structure, like a timber-framed house where all the parts are nailed together, they're interdependent.
The key academic term here is non-additive.
That's one. Non-additive. You cannot separate a person into a woman effect plus an African-American effect. The parts rely on each other to stand. If you pull out one beam, the entire house changes shape. The stresses all redistribute.
The whole structure is fundamentally different.
Exactly.
The text used a great example about corporate hiring to explain this, which I think makes it really concrete. A company might look at its hiring stats and say, hey, look at us. We hired white men, we hired black men, and we hired white women. We've got diversity covered.
Right. They're doing the simple math.
But if you look closer, what are they missing?
They have 0 black women.
0. And in their math, their additive math, they think they have it all covered. They think, well, we got the black perspective from the men we hired, and we got the woman perspective from the white women we hired. So if we just add those two together...
We understand the black female experience, which is just absurd when you say it out loud.
It's completely absurd. The experience of a black woman is distinct. It's a unique structure. It's its own timber-framed house. You can't understand her experience by just adding those two other experiences together.
It's a completely different architecture of identity.
There was another data point here that really drove this home for me, the one about veterinary students.
Oh, yes. This was fascinating. So the top-line statistic is that women constitute something like 75% of all veterinary students.
Okay, so if you're just looking at the woman beam of the house, you'd think, wow, women love being vets. We've solved the gender gap in this field. Mission accomplished.
Yeah.
But when you look at the actual structure, the timber frame, you see that the vast majority of those students are white women.
That's the intersection. If you just attribute this trend to women in general, you are completely ignoring how race and gender frame that house together. It's not just women who are becoming vets in huge numbers. It is specifically white women.
And that's a huge distinction. If you're a university trying to recruit a diverse class of vets and your entire strategy is just target women, you're going to miss the mark completely.
Because you aren't seeing the whole frame. You're effectively blind to that crucial intersection of race and gender. You're trying to fix the house without understanding the blueprint.
Which brings us to the third framework, the cloud.
Right. And if the timber frame is about how identities intersect within a person, the cloud is about the variation between people in the same group.
I feel like the cloud is basically The author's way of shouting, "Stop stereotyping."
That's a pretty good summary, yeah. The analogy is that these categories we use, like Asian American or white male, they're not precise single points on a graph.
They're diffuse clouds. They have fuzzy edges.
Exactly. So no single person can ever be the center of the cloud. No single person can represent the entire category.
The text uses the example of the Irish American Catholic educated bundle.
Which on the surface sounds pretty specific, right?
It does. You think you have a clear picture.
But then he points out that that same cloud includes people as wildly diverse as Conan O'Brien, Bill Murray, and Elizabeth Vargas.
Wait, really? I didn't know Elizabeth Vargas was in that cloud.
She is. And just think about Conan O'Brien and Bill Murray. They are profoundly different people despite sharing those identity tags. One is a talk show host known for self-deprecating, absurd humor. The other is a legendary actor known for his deadpan comedy and these deeply melancholic roles.
So the implication here is that there's no such thing as a singular woman's perspective.
Or a white man's perspective. There is only a distribution, a cloud of perspectives held by people who happen to be in those groups.
So if you're a manager and you hire one woman and you expect her to speak for all women,
You're asking her to do the impossible. You're asking a single data point to represent the entire cloud. It's statistically absurd and, frankly, pretty insulting.
and that, I think, is where the transition happens in our study group today. We have these frameworks, the icebergs, the timber frames, the clouds, which are great for thinking. But now we have to connect identity to cognition.
How do we get from the cloud to the actual work, to the thinking?
What's the mechanism?
Yeah.
The text lays it out as a kind of chain reaction.
That's a good way to put it. The chain is identity leads to experiences, and experiences then shape your cognitive repertoire.
Because we often live in, let's be honest, segregated communities, or because we share specific cultural practices, our identities heavily influence what we experience on a day-to-day basis.
And those experiences literally wire our brains. They're not just stories we tell. They physically influence how we think and what we pay attention to.
There was that fascinating example about cultural vision. I mean, literally how people see things.
The Western versus Eastern focus. Yeah, this is based on some really famous studies. They show that Westerners, generally speaking, tend to focus on individual objects. You show them a picture of a fish tank and they say, look at that big fish.
They see the foreground object.
Right. And Easterners.
They focus on the context, the relationships.
Exactly. They're more likely to say, notice the pattern of the fish, or look at the plants and the water in the background. They see the whole system. And the key thing is this isn't genetic. It's a result of cultural practice and experience shaping what the brain learns to pay attention to over a lifetime.
So that's a direct, measurable link between identity, in this case, cultural background, and cognition, what you actually see and process.
It is. The text also makes a really useful distinction here between fluid and crystallized intelligence. Can you break that down for us?
Sure. So crystallized intelligence is basically your library of facts. It's everything you've learned and stored.
Like, what is the capital of Peru?
Exactly. Define cosine.
Yeah.
Who wrote Hamlet? It's stored knowledge.
Okay. And fluid intelligence?
Fluid intelligence is more like your brain's processing power.
Mm-hmm.
It's your ability to solve new problems, to see patterns, to use logic in unfamiliar situations.
And the interesting thing the text notes is that fluid intelligence is incredibly dependent on your life experiences. The heuristics, the mental shortcuts and rules of thumb you learn from living your life are what you use to solve new problems.
And since identity shapes your life experiences.
It therefore shapes your fluid intelligence. It gives you a unique set of those heuristics.
Okay, we absolutely have to talk about the upside down video story because this is the moment in the chapter where I just went, oh, okay. Now I really get it.
It's such a perfect, concrete example. It's a classic story from Laszlo Bock when he was at Google.
So the setup is YouTube is looking at all their data, and they realize that something like 10% of the videos being uploaded by users are upside down, just completely flipped.
A huge number, and the engineering team is baffled. They're digging through the code, they're checking upload protocols. They absolutely cannot figure out why thousands of people are uploading upside-down content. It makes no sense.
Because the entire engineering team was right-handed.
That's the punchline.
It took one left-handed engineer on the team to look at the problem and basically say, guys, it's the lefties.
Because when a right-handed person turns their phone to film horizontally, they tend to turn it one way, let's say counterclockwise, to get the volume buttons out of the way.
But a left-handed person, to keep their dominant hand steady on the phone, often turns it the other way, clockwise.
And the software, written by right-handed engineers for right-handed users, was only written to recognize the right-handed turn. It didn't account for the other orientations.
That is just such a perfect, undeniable example. It
Yeah.
wasn't that the right-handed engineers were incompetent or biased in a malicious way. They were just right-handed.
Their own physical identity created a cognitive blind spot. They literally couldn't see the problem from the other perspective.
And that is the diversity bonus in action. It wasn't about social justice in that moment. It was about fixing a product for 10% of your market. The identity-handedness created a specific experience, which led to a specific cognitive insight that the rest of the team physically could not see.
I love that story. But the text is also careful to warn us about taking this too far. We can't just assume every identity trait gives you a unique superpower. We have to be really careful about the difference between stereotypes and what he calls statistical signatures.
Right, this brings us back to the cloud. The text explicitly warns against falling into the woman's perspective trap.
Yeah, that phrase, we need a woman's perspective on this. The author argues it's not just imprecise, it's actually offensive.
Why offensive?
Because it reduces a complex, timber-framed house to a single brick. It asks one person to speak for millions.
To represent the whole cloud.
Right. And the text proposes a really helpful thought experiment here. It says, imagine you made a list of everything men know, call it set M, and everything women know, set F. What would you find if you compared those lists?
A massive overlap.
A huge, nearly total overlap. Men and women both know that cars run on gasoline. They both know that horses have 4 legs. They both know the sky is blue. The shared knowledge is enormous.
And this is the key. There are statistical differences at the margins.
Exactly. While individuals vary, that's the cloud, the groups themselves do have what he calls statistical signatures. This is basically how Google Ads works.
How so?
Well, Google can predict your gender or your age with pretty high accuracy just based on your search history. Not because all men search for one thing and all women search for another, but because of thousands of tiny statistical differences in search patterns.
The examples in the text were pretty funny and stark.
They were very distinct, yeah.
Like whiskey drinkers. The data says they are about 60% men. Hunters. Something like 90% men. And vasectomy patients.
I should certainly hope that's 100% men.
Right. But the point is, if your company is building a product for hunters, or designing a marketing campaign for whiskey, or creating a post-op recovery guide for vasectomies, a room full of only women will statistically be more likely to lack the specific, nuanced knowledge and experience needed.
And this gets much more serious when we look at something like the world of finance. The text brings up the 2008 financial crisis. The argument is that the profound lack of identity diversity on Wall Street meant the bankers were all operating from a very similar, very small cloud.
A cloud of older, white, wealthy men from a handful of elite schools.
Right. And that group, for all its intelligence, likely lacked the mental models, the lived experience, to understand the reality of the people who were actually flipping houses in Florida or taking out subprime mortgages in Nevada. They didn't have the statistical signature of the working class in their cognitive repertoire.
So they missed the bubble, because everyone in the room was looking at the world from the same angle and shared the same blind spots.
It's the upside-down video problem, but instead of YouTube, it's the global economy.
Precisely.
Okay, I want to pivot to the Tom Hanks is busy experiment. This part of the chapter really made me stop and think about my own brain and how it works.
It's a really powerful exercise. Let's do it for you, the listener. Play along with us.
Okay, so imagine this. Tom Hanks has been cast in a movie. He's the hero. He's saving some teens from some disaster. He's being the good guy we all know. But at the last minute, Tom Hanks drops out. You are the casting director. Who do you cast to replace him?
Just take a second. Who immediately pops into your head?
When the author runs this experiment, what are the common answers he gets?
Usually, it's George Clooney, Brad Pitt, Liam Neeson, maybe Matt Damon if you're thinking a bit younger.
I have to admit, my first thought was George Clooney.
Me too. What do you notice about that pattern? They're all white men of a certain age. This is what the author calls the adjacent possible.
The adjacent possible.
Yeah, your brain doesn't search all of humanity. It searches for someone who looks the part based on the category of the person you just removed. It looks for the closest, most obvious nadir in your mental database.
But then the text flips the script. It says, okay, stop looking for a replacement for Tom Hanks. Instead, just list the adjectives that describe him.
Right. So, what are they? He's a huge star. He's seen as dependable, kind, Middle-aged. He has incredible artistic range, multiple Academy Awards. He can be a hero, but he's also accessible, an everyman.
And when you filter by those adjectives, not by appearance, who fits that description perfectly?
Denzel Washington.
Woo.
It's so obvious once you see it.
Denzel fits every single one of those adjectives. They have similar box office stats, a similar off-screen reputation as a good guy. They've both even played heroic pilots who crash-landed planes, Hanks and Sully, Denzel in Flight.
But, and this is the really important part, if you didn't think of Denzel Washington first, does that make you a racist?
And the author's answer is no, not necessarily. It's not about active racism. It's about a biased search engine in your brain. Your mental database is organized by these adjacent possibles that are often unconsciously grouped by race or gender.
You've got great white male actors in one mental folder and great black male actors in another, and your brain doesn't automatically cross-reference them.
Exactly. So having a diverse casting team or a diverse corporate board or a diverse hiring committee helps because someone else's adjacent possible might naturally include Denzel. Their mental folders are organized differently.
It widens the search.
Yeah.
It helps connect the dots that your own brain might not automatically connect. And getting the Denzels of the world into your movie or your company is a massive, massive bonus.
Speaking of bonuses, let's talk about what the book calls opportunity bonuses. The text gives us 3 powerful case studies of real people who used their unique identity to see opportunities that literally everyone else was missing.
These are the Denzels of the business and science world.
I love that. Yes, these stories are really the heart of the bonus argument. Let's start with Dr. Patricia Bath.
Her story is just incredible. I mean, she was a true prodigy doing cancer research at 16. She goes on to become an ophthalmologist, a brilliant physician.
And her identity, being both a Black woman and a top-tier medical professional, gave her access to 2 very different worlds. She worked at Harlem Hospital, which served a predominantly African-American, lower-income community.
And she also worked at the Columbia University Eye Clinic.
Right, which was much wealthier and much whiter. Now, most doctors in that position would just go to work, do their surgeries, and go home. They'd exist in those 2 worlds separately.
But what did she see?
Because she was standing with a foot in both worlds, because the timber frame of her professional training and her community identity were bolted together, she noticed a pattern that no one else saw.
She saw that the blindness rates among the African-American patients at Harlem Hospital were significantly higher than among the white patients at Columbia.
It was a massive disparity. And she didn't just accept it. She investigated it. She realized it wasn't just bad luck or genetics. It was a systemic lack of access to basic eye care.
This insight led her to pioneer a whole new field called community ophthalmology, a new approach to public health. And, as if that wasn't enough, she also invented the laser phaco probe, a revolutionary device for treating cataracts.
So the bonus here wasn't just that she was a brilliant doctor. It was that her identity allowed her to stand in a unique spot, a specific angle where the light showed something no one else could see. That massive gap in care between Harlem and Columbia.
It goes back to that quote from earlier in the chapter. People only see what they are prepared to see. Her identity prepared her to see that gap.
Absolutely. The second story is Robert Johnson, the founder of BET.
This is a pure market opportunity bonus. So you have to go back in time to the early 1980s. MTV is exploding. It's the biggest thing in culture. But what is actually on MTV?
Rock and roll, pop music, a lot of British new wave bands.
And almost 0 black artists. I think the book says maybe Tina Turner, and that's about it. David Bowie famously went on MTV and straight up asked the VJ, "Why aren't you playing any black artists?"
So you have these white media executives looking at the market and thinking, we're good, we have the music audience covered.
They were culturally blind. They were inside their own bubble. Robert Johnson, meanwhile, is looking at the exact same world and sees a massive vacuum.
He saw that an entire universe of Black culture, R&B, soul, funk, early hip-hop was being completely ignored by the mainstream.
Yeah.
He also noticed something interesting about college football.
Oh, right. The games between HBCUs, the historically black colleges and universities.
Exactly. Games like Grambling versus Jackson State, these were huge cultural events. These schools were sending just as many players to the NFL as big schools like USC or Ohio State, but were the games on national television?
Of course not.
So Johnson sees these 2 huge underserved markets, music and sports, and he creates BET, Black Entertainment Television, to fill that gap.
And he becomes the first African-American billionaire.
Right. He didn't invent the market. The market was already there, starving for content. The audience was there. The white executives just didn't have the cognitive repertoire, the cultural lens to see it. Johnson did.
And the third story is Christy Haubeger, who founded Latina Magazine.
It's a very similar story, just in a different market. She's at Stanford Law School, incredibly educated at the top of her game, but she looks around at the world and sees no role models who look like her. There's no Latina Sandra Day O'Connor.
So if the role models don't exist,
You have to manufacture them. She starts Latina Magazine not just to sell ads for lipstick, but to intentionally highlight Latina astronauts, judges, entrepreneurs, scientists.
he was creating the role models she was missing. And again, it was a massive business success.
Because the mainstream media was treating women's magazines as if that just meant white women's magazines.
It goes right back to the timber frame. They thought they had the woman beam covered, but they completely missed the crucial intersection of Latina and woman.
Precisely. And what's so important about these three stories is that they aren't stories about charity or social programs. They are stories about billions of dollars in economic value that was created because someone had a different statistical signature in their brain, which allowed them to see an opportunity everyone else was blind to.
Now, I know what some people in our study group might be thinking right now. Okay, this all makes sense for media or magazines or social issues, but what about hard science? Does identity diversity really matter when you're building a rocket?
This is always the hardest sell, isn't it? Science is supposed to be objective, pure, free of human bias. But the text makes a powerful argument that even in science, our metaphors, our models, our very questions are shaped by our identities.
This sperm and the egg story, that just blew my mind.
It's a classic example from the history of biology. So 50 years ago, how is the process of fertilization described in textbooks?
It was a war movie. It was all about the conquering sperm that attacked the passive egg.
The text jokes that it was scored to the Ride of the Valkyries. The sperm were the active agents, the heroes on a quest. The egg was just this passive prize waiting to be claimed.
And who is writing these scientific descriptions?
Overwhelmingly men. Male researchers projected a male-centric view of agency and competition onto the cellular level.
But that wasn't actually scientifically accurate.
Not at all. As more diverse teams, including many more women, started researching this, they discovered the egg is incredibly active in the process. It's not passive. It selects specific sperm based on genetic compatibility. It releases chemical signals to guide them. It captures them.
So the whole conquering hero narrative was just wrong.
It was scientifically wrong, but it persisted for decades because the scientific community lacked the identity diversity needed to even question the underlying metaphor.
That is wild.
Hmm?
It just goes to show that even our facts are wrapped in stories, and those stories come from our identities.
And for the rocket science question, the text gives us that great NASA thought experiment.
All right, so you're the NASA administrator. You have to assemble a team to build the new space launch system, the SLS rocket. You have two groups to choose from.
Group A is 8 Muslim men. They're all the same age. They all graduated from Georgia Tech's aerospace program, and they've all worked at the Marshall Space Flight Center for the last 10 years.
So super smart guys,
Mm-hmm.
but very homogenous training, homogenous identity, homogenous experience.
Okay. Group B is diverse. Men, women, different races, different ages, but also, crucially, diverse professional backgrounds. Some came from Boeing, some from Ford Motor Company, some are electrical engineers, others are mechanical or software engineers.
Who wins? Who builds a better rocket?
Group B wins, hands down, and the text makes a really important point here. They don't win just because they look different. They win because their identity diversity acts as a powerful proxy for diverse training, diverse perspectives, and diverse heuristics.
The cloud of knowledge and experience in Group B is just so much bigger.
It's exponentially bigger. And the text uses a really cool physics analogy to explain why this matters. Sculling, rowing.
I definitely did not see this coming in a chapter on diversity, but okay, go on.
It's all about the center of gravity. Men generally have broad shoulders and a higher center of gravity. When you put a man in one of those incredibly narrow, unstable rowing shells, he feels tippy. His heuristic, his natural ingrained reaction, is to use power to stabilize the boat, to muscle through the instability.
Okay, and women?
Women tend to have a lower center of gravity, so in that same unstable boat, their heuristic is often different. They tend to stabilize by relaxing and using balance, not brute force.
So you have a power heuristic and a balance heuristic for solving the exact same problem of instability.
Exactly. Now, bring that back to NASA. If you were designing a satellite or a spacecraft, do you only want the power thinkers in the room?
No, of course not. You want both. You want the team to have the option to solve a problem with power or with balance, depending on what's needed.
Precisely. If everyone in the room has the same physical experience of gravity and balance, you might completely miss half the solution space. Identity diversity brings those different physically ingrained heuristics to the engineering table.
We're coming into the home stretch here in the chapter. We've talked a lot about the direct benefits, better ideas, spotting missed markets, but the text says there's also a really important indirect benefit to diversity.
Yeah, this is the influence factor. The idea is that diversity improves the performance of the non-diverse members of the group as well.
How does that work? It sounds a bit counterintuitive.
The text gives a simple example, a garden design experiment. Imagine you have a planning committee for a new public park, and it's all able-bodied people. Then you add one person to the committee who uses a wheelchair. What happens?
Well, obviously the person in the wheelchair is going to bring up the need for ramps and accessible pathways.
Yes, but what's more important is that everyone else on the committee immediately starts paying attention to curb heights and pathway gradients. The mere presence of that different identity shifts the focus and awareness of the entire group.
You don't even need the person to speak. Their presence primes the others to think about accessibility.
That's the indirect influence, and we see hard data on this in that stock market study the author cites.
Oh, this one was fascinating.
They found that ethnically diverse trading groups created 60% fewer price bubbles than homogeneous groups. 60%.
So why? Was it because the diverse traders were just individually smarter?
No, that wasn't it. The reason is that in homogeneous groups, people tend to trust each other too easily and too quickly. There's a tendency to follow the herd. Oh, Bob thinks this stock is worth $100, and Bob is like me, so he must be right.
There's less friction.
Exactly. But in a diverse group, there's a little more social friction. People are forced to question assumptions more critically. They don't blindly follow the person next to them. They ask for more proof.
And that critical thinking, which is triggered by the presence of diversity, leads to 60% more accurate pricing in the market.
It's a massive finding. It suggests that just being in a diverse room makes everyone in that room smarter and more rigorous, even if you're not the diverse one.
It forces you to explain your thinking. You can't rely on cultural shorthand. And that process of elaboration leads to better air checking for the whole team.
The final point the chapter really hits on is about defining the problem in the first place.
Right. We often talk about diversity as a tool for solving problems. But the author argues that identity is even more fundamental. It determines which problems we even see and value enough to try to solve.
Think back to Dr. Patricia Beth. The problem of blindness inequality didn't really exist for the doctors at Columbia. It wasn't on their radar. It only became a defined problem because of her unique vantage point.
Exactly. So inclusion is necessary not just at the execution stage, but at the very beginning, at the goal-setting stage. If you don't have diversity in the room when you are deciding what to build, you will end up building perfectly functional things that only serve a small fraction of the population.
So to bring it all back to our mission for this deep dive, the big question, does identity diversity actually lead to cognitive diversity?
And the answer from the text seems to be a clear yes.
A clear but qualified yes. It's not automatic, it's not magic, but statistically and structurally, yes. Because of the timber frame, because of the cloud, our identities profoundly shape our experiences, and those experiences are what fill our cognitive toolkits.
And if we limit our teams to people who look and think like us, we are, by definition, limiting our toolkits. We're stuck with the adjacent possibles that we already know.
We're stuck with George Clooney when the project really needs Denzel Washington.
I love that. Okay, before we wrap up our study group for today, let's do a quick summary for everyone's notes. The key takeaways from Chapter 4.
Sounds good. So takeaway number 1 would have to be the frameworks. Don't just look at the tip of the iceberg. Always remember the timber-framed house. You can't just add identities together. And respect the cloud variation within groups is enormous.
Okay. Number 2.
Number 2 is the mechanism, the chain reaction. Identity leads to experience, which creates fluid intelligence and a unique set of heuristics, like the left-handed phone flip.
And number 3.
Number 3 is the bonus itself. It comes from direct opportunity bonuses, like seeing new markets like BT, and from indirect benefits, where diversity makes the entire group think harder and more accurately.
That's a solid summary. And for our final provocative thought, the thing we want you, the listener, to walk away thinking about.
I want to go right back to that adjacency idea.
The Tom Hanks problem.
The Tom Hanks problem. We all have a mental search engine. When we have a problem to solve, we search for a solution. When we have a job opening, we search for a candidate. My question for you to mull over is this. Who is your Tom Hanks?
Ooh, that's good.
What brilliant solutions or brilliant people are you missing simply because your mental search engine is limited to the adjacent possibles of your own identity group? Who is the Denzel Washington that you aren't seeing because you're only looking for the next George Clooney?
That is a fantastic question to chew on. Expand your adjacency.
That's the challenge.
All right, that officially wraps up our deep dive into Chapter 4 of the Diversity Bonus. Good luck with the reading, good luck with the course, and we'll see you in the next study session.
Take care.